I picked up the price list once more, overjoyed at the prospect that Alexarin was finally conducting her affairs with more forethought and long-term consideration, and not haphazard personal whimsy. I will pay currency for the identification of 2 objects. We can discuss payment for the others. 10 minutes per object, yes? I pulled out a gold-plated chalice, a curved knife with the blade formed from a larger crystal shard, an engraved bracelet, and a bronze metal coil of 6 loops. I was fairly sure of what that object was, but wanted confirmation due to appearance. And if it is what I think, I may need to use it soon. 1 minute, because I have it committed to memory today. Is this sufficient for the spell component? I held a black spear between my thumb and index finger. She pulled the goggles over her eyes and extended her hand to accept the item. It was actually a dark blue pearl with the Yodelo Ocean's signature faint pink swirl. I knew I could easily obtain 30 or 40 platinum coins for it from a reputable jeweler. Yes, this is well above the necessary quality to identify enchantments placed on an object or person. I will return it once our transactions are complete, she said. Good, I obtained all these items at the ritual site in Seldritch Valley. I indicated the items on the table. I think the metal ring spring is a slaver's band, but those are usually rusted metal. There are several types of slaver's bands made to catch different individuals and creatures of prodigious strength, dire bears, ogres, berserkers, and so forth. She explained as she picked up the coil and examined it closely. It's a slaver's band created by an artificer hired by Bolero and enchanted for durability and flexibility. After a minute or so, Alexarin explained, this particular coil was specifically created to restrain quadrupeded beasts and multi-limbed creatures like Gorelion, squid, or displacer beasts, and the keyword to activate it was stand still. Can I use it on smaller people, humans and such, without crushing or strangling them, if it's intended for beasts? I asked, smiling faintly. Well, they're designed to reshape in order to effectively restrain the target without causing additional harm in the process. Yes, you could restrain smaller beings or animals, but they may be able to escape if they know the keywords, or are strong enough or very, very agile. She replied, obviously suspicious as I went to take it off the table, but she was faster. When I tried to grab it, she straightened to her full height and held it over her head and beyond my immediate reach. I made an attempt at a grasping jump, but she merely stepped back and shifted it to the other hand. You can have this once payment is received and you are departing. She placed the coil into the pocket of her apron. If you steal it from me, I grew angry. If you believe I'd steal from you, then why are you here at all? She sighed. You've never stolen from me. True, but I'm accustomed to unseelie being light-fingered, I replied. I would only steal from you if you had something I needed to assist someone, and I couldn't obtain it elsewhere, and you were being unreasonable. But I would still leave something of equivalent value, she said cheerfully. You're not supposed to say that, Alexarin, I frowned. Say what? I commented as I picked up the chalice to begin examining it. You shouldn't admit that you'd steal from me. It damages Weird, Akureyri continued. I admitted nothing. I outlined the conditions I'd steal from you. And Weird is murky on the topic of stealing, particularly if something of equal or greater value is left in exchange, I replied as I ran my fingers along the lip of the cup and felt a slight taste of salt on my tongue. Value can be subjective, Akureyri persisted. Stealing is taking something without permission. I remained silent as I completed the ritual casting. After a moment, I smelled the scent of lilacs and tasted iron. The chalice bore necromancy and transmutation spells. I agree with both of your statements, but since permission is often based on a whim, weird is rather inconsistent on enforcement. I stopped as the putrid scent of grave moss filled my nose. My eyes watered and I repressed a desire to vomit. After a few moments, I informed her of the result of my divining ritual. This was enchanted and blessed by a priest or priestess of the Morgan. It's a preservation vessel. Any living or recently living material placed in it is preserved at that point. If you put someone's ashes or blood within them, they can be restored to life within the appropriate magic. Creatures that require sustenance from blood, flesh, brains would be sated for 1 day if they eat or drink anything stored in it. But that effect is only once every few days. That's disgusting, Akureyri interjected with revulsion in her tone. Yes, but potentially useful, I agreed. And finally, if you fill it with a mundane liquid, it will convert that liquid into a vial's worth of holy water that lasts indefinitely. You can create that once a day at sunset. Akureyri looked at the cup in obvious distaste. I could tell she was contemplating whether or not it had any strategic or tactical value as I picked up the bracelet. It was dwarven handiwork but had draconic runes engraved on it. I shuddered from sudden chill, felt a surge of heat akin to opening a forge or stepping close to a bonfire, and the slow, itchy burn of an acid splash. After a few more moments, I smelled the burning of air following a lightning bolt strike and the acrid smell of the green dragon's death fog. This bracelet provides the wearer a precognitive flash of insight on how to avoid a dragon's breath attacks, I explained. This might be useful if I need to slay a dragon, Akureyri remarked, but didn't make a move for it. Instead, she picked up the curved knife and handed it to me, hilt first. This knife blade is forged from rutile. It requires an arcane bond, but it won't allow me to bond with it to learn what it does. Then I will have to do additional research, which increases my fee accordingly, I replied. What about a trade instead? Auntie Vo said you crafted the pistol she has that shoots out several flaming darts in a scatter pattern. I made that specifically for Mother as a gift. If you want to commission something similar, I can produce one. It will take approximately 9 months because the design research and testing is completed already. I will be away in 9 months. I can deliver it for an additional charge. I need something sooner. What do you have right now? What are you looking for? A gabelge, Akureyri replied. I looked at her blankly, maintaining a facade of ignorance even after she started to glare at me. The gabelge spear is as iconic to the Doin Sahi as longswords are to Eladrin and bows are to elves. Under Uncle Lotier's watchful eye, Akureyri herself trained me how to properly wield and throw one, but I couldn't resist getting a taste of her aggravation. Isn't that some kind of axe? I remarked casually. I swear to E-Child, if you don't remember what a gabelge is, I will beat you with an oak switch until you remember. Her irritation did not have its usual peppery tang, but was bitter-tasting like overripe kale. Was she disappointed? Oh, calm down, Akureyri. I frown at her. I know the gabelge is a heavy barbed spear. You taught me how to use one. Don't you remember anything about our childhood? You aren't as funny as you think, she muttered, obviously not amused. How would you know? You obviously murdered or traded away your sense of humor long ago, I retorted. It only took you 200 years to realize that, Akureyri remarked. Oh, I've always known your sense of humor was. Wait. I paused to consider. Did you really barter away your sense of humor? Akureyri looked at me with a sober expression. How do you think I became so skilled at mounted combat? Uncle Lutier taught you. No, I was visited by Skathach. She offered to instruct me to mastery of any combat style of my choice in exchange for my funny bone.
Really? Skathach was a legendary champion who was known to appear to warriors of great combat potential and offer to train them. When she gave me a straight-faced look, I shrugged lightly. I guess that could explain how you quickly surpassed Uncle Luthier in jousting. When Akureyri bursted out laughing, I realized she was ridiculing me, and I laughed at myself as well. Her deadpan delivery had me convinced. She abruptly grabbed the top pocket of my apron and pulled me down to meet her gaze inches from her face. I could feel the warmth of her breath and smell the citrus scent of oranges that she had obviously eaten earlier.
Enough with the song and dance, Alexarin. I know you crafted or acquired some high-quality weapons. Show me what you have.
Oranges are still your favorite fruit, she asked.
What? I asked in a confused tone.
Your breath smells like oranges.
I shook my head but didn't release the front of her apron. When she started to withdraw, I tightened my grip, pulled her closer and pressed my nose against hers. For a brief moment, I contemplated the artistic simplicity of knocking her unconscious and carrying her to Selridge Valley myself. But despite the Sovereign of Corvit's assurance that she had no intention of harming her, Alexarin's blood would be on my head if she was lying or changed her mind and decided to kill her. Alexarin whittled away at my patience until there was only sawdust with her inane comments about nothing and everything. But I didn't hate her. I just want her to stop traipsing all over the place, return home, and assume a proper role as the Weather Weaver's daughter. Nobody else who supposedly cares for her well-being is trying to get her to settle down, so I have to do it. An unexpected meeting with the Phantom Queen is just the sort of thing to put a bit of the fear of gods in her and make her want to return to the Wildlands.
Is that the primary purpose of your visit? To obtain a new weapon for your personal use? For your military campaign here? She inquired.
And if I say yes?
Mr. Zinni, she called out and shifted to untie the top of her apron, but I just grabbed her by her skirt with my other hand. I released her with a quick shove just before the furblonde looked out into the foyer.
Yes, Miss Inara? He looked at me in confusion as Alexarin stumbled backwards, no longer feeling the resistance from me holding her in place. But I felt an odd draining sensation as my arms felt watery, and I know the weird emanating in this place would prevent me from restraining her like that again.
I am showing Colonel Solomar the weapons display. Follow the next few steps on the potion creation. Come get me if there's any problem.
Sure thing, Miss Inara. He looked at her and glanced over to me in obvious suspicion, but he just smiled and nodded. She took me by the hand and led me upstairs, deliberately moving at a quickened pace. I stumbled once upon the initial step, but promptly regained my footing and kept pace with her.
The weapons display was a room on the second floor of my lab that had several human-sized statues. Each one was positioned to hold or swing a different weapon. I had painted several true to size, weight, and appearance wooden weapon replicas that bore magical enchantments that I kept locked away but would consider selling or crafting under the right circumstances. Akureyri's attention was immediately drawn towards the heavy weapons.
Since when did you start using pole arms?
She inquired after noticing the double-edged poleaxe. Since never. The only two-handed weapons I use are a staff and rarely a throwing spear.
What about the longbow?
Akureyri remarked. The longbow isn't a two-handed weapon, I stated.
I will pay you 500 platinum if you can show me how to use a longbow as intended without using two or more appendages or tools. Right now,
Akureyri said in challenge. Weapons were her forte, and she wasted no time in asserting her superior knowledge on the subject. You're right in that one does need 2 hands to use it. I bowed slightly in deference to her experience on the subject. So, add a longbow to the list of 2-handed weapons I use. But it is equally effective if you use it 2-handed, or if I set it on a firing brace and use it 1-handed. My staff is also equally effective regardless of whether or not it is used 2-handed.
Maybe it's because you don't know how to use a staff effectively, Akureyri smiled.
For a brief moment, I entertained the idea of challenging her to a spar and using my lightning rod, but shake my head when I noticed her look of anticipation and got a vague impression that she was either mocking me with sexual innuendo or trying to goad me into a physical altercation. I'll let you retain that opinion unchallenged for today. I smiled, not taking the bait. She frowned momentarily, but it disappeared as she resumed looking at the weapons.
How does this work?
By each other, Akureyri, you of everyone I know should know that you pick up said weapon in a firm grip and swing or thrust at your target. I quipped deliberately, invoking her idol's name.
You know I was referring to the enchantments. Stop being an irreverent ass and be serious for a change, Alexarin.
Akureyri replied tersely. As you wish, I said. My cheerful smile melted into a more serious mien as I imitated my mother's facial expression that she used to convey she was being stern. These are replicas of an actual version I possess. All of the originals are crafted using high-quality materials and enchanted to impact all but innately or selectively resistant creatures and beings. I occasionally add an additional protective or divination ability or spell usable a few times a day. And my highest quality weapons have a continuous or additional spell effect when a particularly powerful or precise strike is made. Akureyri pointed to the only morning star here, a rod with a cylindrical head that had 3 rows of spikes ringing it. That's Scattershot. It's a morning star. You can detach the head and throw it, or use the trigger button and fire it up to 25 feet away. When it detonates, the spikes shoot out in all directions. If the head itself hits an individual target, it will apparate them about 30 feet away from you, like Misty Step. Afterwards, it's a metal baton until the head reforms at the next sunrise. Or 3 times a day, if you strike someone with the head attached, they may run in fear for a few seconds.
How much do you want for it?
500 platinum, I said without missing a beat. That was the price Zinni suggested. She frowned at me momentarily, looking to see if I was serious, but my expression was unchanged. And she resumed looking at the other weapons. She started inspecting a southern longsword. However, she normally preferred heavier weapons for powerful blows, and the southern weapons were designed to be lightweight for increased speed and precision.
Save Scattershot, none of these are exceptionally appealing to me. Do you have a weapon called Frost Nip?
I do.
What is that? I pointed to a western bastard sword underneath a glass-like display. It was not a replica, but the display also wasn't typical glass.
I finished crafting it last spring. Every strike that lands will send a chill through the target, and when it's drawn for use, opponents that hit you feel the bite of winter. It has a bit of personality as well. If the sword likes you, and you bond with it, each strike becomes a frost ray that slows the target for a few moments. Just like the spell, and discharges ice shards to strike any nearby hostile opponent, and the damage attackers sustain if they strike you is greater. If Frost Nip feels you are a worthy champion or paladin, it will become exceptionally sharp against evil targets and provide protection against cold-based attacks and damage.
Why did you have to make it winter-themed? She didn't dignify my question with an acknowledgement. How much do you want for it?
It's not for sale,
she replied. Why not?
I crafted it to provide to a paladin or knight champion under fitting circumstances and in need.
I happen to be a paladin and knight champion in need of an enchanted weapon.
You are not in need of a weapon of Frostnip's caliber, Akureyri. If you get involved in the war here, Baggart will be more useful to you since it alerts you to the presence of undead as well as inflicts additional damage upon them.
How do you know about... Initially surprised, I trailed off as I remembered she had a good memory. What if I trade you the rutile blade I showed you earlier?
I don't even know its properties, she pointed out.
Alexarin, can I be honest with you?
I don't know, Akureyri. Can you?
I looked at her pointedly and I bristled momentarily, but sighed in resignation. That knife was used by one of those unicorn killer cultists, or whatever you want to call them. I know it's powerful, but I can't and probably shouldn't use it. As for its properties, it's true I don't know what it can do. But I do know an expertly cut piece of rutile about 1 inch in diameter and embedded in the hilt or pommel is sufficient to hold standard protection or detection or performance powers. The entire blade is rutile, so I know it holds a very powerful enchantment, or lots of lesser ones. She nodded slightly. It was a sound logical inference, but she was still skeptical. Even if the knife ends up not having any enchantments, you could repurpose it for several items instead.
What if it holds enchantments that I do not particularly want or need?
Enchantments you cannot make use of does not exist, I countered, but in a tone to make it sound like a compliment.
A fair point.
Alexarin conceded with a faint smile at my verbal riposte. I will trade you Baggart and the rutile knife in exchange for Frostnip, and you personally go check out the Seldritch Valley within the next 10 days. If at the end of 3 months you think the deal is unsatisfactory, I will return Frostnip to you, and you'll return Baggart to me. You can keep the rutile knife as payment for going to Seldritch Valley.
Something about her insistence and urgency that I go personally to Seldritch Valley was extremely suspicious, and I was reluctant to agree. Why do you need me to go at all? It's as if you're trying to get rid of me here or lure me into a trap in some remote area.
I promise, I'm not trying to distract or trap you,
she insisted. Add 3 drops of your blood to each of these. I hand Akureyri 2 crystal vials of holy water.
Why?
She asked, even as she blithely cut her finger and squeezed the drops of her blood into each container. If something sinister happens to me while in Seldritch Valley, I explain as I nick my index finger and add 3 drops of my blood to each vial. This vial can be used to divine the truth, and if what you say is true, and you have nothing to do with it, the vial will exonerate you, or damn you if you're lying. Likewise, if something befalls you in that time frame, the vial will reveal if I am culpable or not.
Why would you hand the vial over if you did kill me?
Oh, for the favor of Queen Titania, Akureyri. I sighed in exasperation and reach up to rub my eyes with my thumb and index finger as the sudden throbbing pain behind my eyes resumed. The notion that Akureyri may not know about temporary fate links crossed my thoughts. I took a deep breath and counted to 10 in order to dispel my aggravation. I apologize for thinking you were familiar with fate links. I managed to smile at her. As soon as our agreement is finalized, I send 1 vial to Hierophant Rowena Briarthorn Solimar. The other will go to Storher Tegendi Viveferi the Weather Weaver, each with a letter outlining the specifics of our contract. Both of them will know how to use it, in the event either of us disappear. I explained patiently to her.
Well, then I want to enclose a letter to both of them as well, I insisted, just in case. Lexerin had shifted from suspicious reluctance to acceptance, irritation and cheerful patience, all within a 2-minute span of time. I suspected my demand would anger her, but it had the opposite effect. She retrieved some paper and an inkwell from her desk and offered them to me as she proceeded to write her own letters. She even permitted me to read hers before sealing both of our letters into the 2 envelopes. As she enacted a binding right to seal our agreement, a heavy weight was lifted from my shoulders as a lecturer stated acceptance. If a run-in with the goddess of death didn't scare her into returning home, nothing would. Alright, Akureyri back in the driver's seat. You were listening to Akureyri's Visit. We at the channel of the Gravedigger Queen have many more stories to tell. Got some scary ones coming up, and then probably back to some D&D for a little while. A little old, a little new, you know what to do. Alright, Akureyri, God of the Games, is out of here.